was just a beautiful soul. She's a light in our family. She loved art and anime. She wanted to go to school in Toronto. She just loved her so much. She was thriving in high school. She never hurt her soul. She was a supporter, LGBTQ supporter, and she was the last person who ever deserved this.
It wasn't supposed to happen in a place like this. A town most people couldn't find on a map suddenly became the center of a national conversation. One morning, everything felt normal. By afternoon, nothing made sense anymore. Parents ran toward a school they once trusted. Students hid in classrooms they thought were safe. And a community that had always felt quiet, distant, untouched, was forced into the spotlight. Before investigators even finished their first briefing, the internet had already erupted. People demanded answers, people argued, people blamed, and the story twisted faster than the facts could keep up. But behind the noise, behind the posts, behind the outrage, 9 lives were gone. Families shattered. A town changed forever. If you're here, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Stories like this deserve clarity, not chaos, and the people living through them deserve to have their truth told without distortion. Because the moment the first headline appeared, the online world didn't wait for details. It didn't pause for families. It didn't hold space for grief. It rushed to fill the silence with theories, assumptions, and arguments about identity, motive, and meaning. People weren't just reacting to the tragedy, they were reacting to each other, and that reaction became its own storm. But let's slow down. Let's step away from the noise and look at what investigators have actually confirmed. The suspect was identified as 18-year-old Jessie Van Rootselaar, a resident of Tumbler Ridge. Police clarified that she was born biologically male and identified as female socially and publicly. That single clarification became the spark for an online fire that spread faster than any official update. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Entire threads focused more on identity than on the victims. And the tragedy itself was pushed aside as people argued over narratives that had nothing to do with the families who were grieving. But the facts remained simple. Jessie was not a student at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. She had dropped out. Investigators haven't said when, they haven't said why, they haven't said what her connection was to the students inside the building that morning. And until they do, every theory online is just speculation. Police have confirmed that 9 people died, including the suspect, 1 teacher, 5 students, 2 family members, and the suspect herself. A long gun and a modified handgun were recovered at the scene. The firearms are still being traced. The suspect once had a firearms license, but it had expired. No firearms were registered to her. That's all investigators have confirmed. Everything else circulating online is noise. But the noise is loud and emotional and relentless. People are angry. People are heartbroken. People are frustrated. Some blame the school. Some blame the family. Some blame society. Some blame identity. And every one of those reactions reveals more about the person posting than it does about the case itself. Because behind every argument, there are real families living through something unimaginable. Kylie Smith was 12. Her family described her as the light of their lives. She loved art. She loved anime. She dreamed of studying in Toronto. She was thriving, and now her family is trying to understand how a child with so much ahead of her could be gone. Maya Edmonds, also 12, survived, but is in critical condition. Her mother wrote that she never imagined she would be asking strangers for prayers. That sentence alone tells you everything about the emotional reality behind the headlines. This isn't a debate. This isn't a talking point. This is a family waiting by a hospital bed, hoping their daughter wakes up. And then there's the second scene, the home, the place where investigators found the suspect's mother, Jennifer Strang, and her 11-year-old son, Emmett. Police haven't said what happened inside that house. They haven't said why. They haven't said what led from that home to the school. And until they do, every assumption online is just that, an assumption. But that hasn't stopped people from filling in the blanks. Some insist they already know the motive. Others claim they've uncovered hidden connections. Others argue that the case proves something about society at large. And the more emotional the claim, the faster it spreads. This is where the online discourse becomes impossible to ignore. People aren't just reacting to the tragedy, they're reacting to what the tragedy represents to them, to their fears, their frustrations, their beliefs about identity, youth, mental health, community, and responsibility. And that's why this case has become so volatile online, because everyone sees something different in it. But the families don't see a debate. They see empty bedrooms. They see unfinished homework. They see art projects that will never be completed. They see a future that was taken from them. And that's why it's important to slow down, breathe, and look at what we actually know, not what the internet insists is true. Investigators have said the suspect acted alone. They've said there are no other suspects. They've said the motive is unknown. They've said the relationships between the suspect and the victims are still under investigation. And until they do, the only responsible thing we can do is focus on the facts, honor the victims, and resist the urge to turn tragedy into fuel for arguments. If you're still watching, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. Not because it helps the algorithm, though it does, but because conversations like this deserve care, clarity, and compassion. As investigators continue their work, more details will emerge. Some will answer questions, some will raise new ones. And when that happens, we'll revisit this case with the same calm, careful approach. Because the people of Tumbler Ridge deserve more than speculation. They deserve understanding. They deserve truth. And they deserve to have their story told with the respect that the online world often forgets to give. For now, we sit with what we know. We acknowledge what we don't. And we remember the names of the people whose lives were taken. Because behind every headline, every argument, every post, there are families who would give anything to have one more ordinary day. And that is the part of the story the internet can't afford to forget.
And as the days move forward, the questions only grow heavier. Investigators continued to map out timelines, interview witnesses, and reconstruct movements that may explain how events unfolded. Every hour brings new fragments, small details that seem insignificant on their own, but may eventually form a clearer picture. And yet the central question remains untouched. What led to this sequence of decisions, and why did it escalate in a way no one in the community could have anticipated? The RCMP has emphasized that this investigation will take time, not because the facts are hidden, but because accuracy matters more than speed. They're examining digital activity, communication patterns, personal history, and any interactions that might reveal context. They're looking at the firearms, the modifications, the origins, and the chain of possession. They're reviewing school records, community reports, and any prior incidents that could provide insight. And they're doing it while balancing the emotional weight of a community that wants answers now. Meanwhile, the public conversation continues to shift. Some people are calling for policy changes. Others are demanding transparency. Others want to understand how a small town with no history of major incidents suddenly found itself at the center of a national tragedy. And woven through all of it is a growing awareness that the online reaction has become part of the story, shaping perceptions before the investigation is complete. This is where careful reporting becomes essential, because when emotions run high, the smallest detail can be misinterpreted, amplified, or taken out of context. A single sentence from a press conference can turn into a trending topic. A partial quote can fuel an entire narrative. And in cases like this, where so much remains unconfirmed, the risk of misinformation becomes even greater. That's why following verified updates matters. Not to silence discussion, but to make sure the conversation is grounded in reality. Because the families affected by this tragedy aren't watching comment sections. They're navigating grief. They're meeting with investigators. They're trying to understand how their lives changed in a single morning. And they deserve a public conversation that reflects the seriousness of what they're going through. As more information emerges, patterns may begin to form. Investigators may identify a motive. They may uncover connections that weren't obvious at first. They may clarify timelines that currently feel fragmented. But until that happens, the most responsible approach is patience, something the online world rarely offers. Still, the community of Tumbler Ridge is showing a different kind of response. Local residents are supporting one another. Schools are offering counseling. Neighbors are checking in on families they barely knew before. And in the middle of a national spotlight, the town is trying to reclaim a sense of stability even as the investigation continues. For viewers following this case, staying informed means staying grounded. It means watching for official updates, not assumptions. It means recognizing that early narratives often shift as more evidence is analyzed. And it means understanding that tragedies like this are never simple, never one-dimensional, and never defined by the loudest voices online. More details will come, more clarity will arrive, and when investigators release their findings, the picture may look different from what many people expect. That's why it's important to follow along, subscribe, and stay connected, because this case is still unfolding, and the next updates may reshape everything we think we understand so far. Until then, the focus remains on the families, the survivors, and the community working to rebuild. Their experience is the heart of this story, and their voices will matter most as the investigation moves forward.